Welcome to The Centurion's Path, a podcast about the life and the trials and tribulations of those who serve. This podcast is about the heroes who protect our communities. To truly understand the path of the protector, tune in with AJ DeAndrea and John McDonald, two nationally known leaders who live the Centurion's Path every day.
Thank you all for joining us today. To our sponsor for today's podcast, Safe Haven Defense, preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind.
Well, welcome to the second episode of the Centurion's Path. And this morning we are honored to have our first guest, Brian Murphy. Thank you so much for taking time out to talk about life and the trials and tribulations of what this profession is about, and you know, the sacrifice for the job and what we get out of that. Which
I appreciate you having me, AJ. John.
This is pretty cool. I gotta say, having you on our podcast as our first guest. When we started talking about, you know, who do we want, and you know, who are those people that are out there living the life, making the difference, that are honorable, and you were top of our list, for both of us, and the fact
without question,
super cool.
I appreciate it. Seriously, I appreciate that, man. You guys are heading in a path that needs to be done, and we need to talk about this stuff and get it out. And you know, I know both of you guys now for it's over a decade.
Yeah. I will say, I'll say this: it's hard to get, you know, this kind of good looks and smarts all together on one podcast, but we've done it. It's proof that middle age is, you know, living large and well.
middle age. I feel like I'm in my old age. Let me tell you, boy. So
I hate to say this, I'm eligible for Social Security now. That's how old I am.
Oh gosh,
that's funny.
Well, Brian, we have known each other for over a decade now, and of course, I know a lot about you and your career. Coming down this road, though, in this podcast, there's people, and we're excited because we had a lot of interest in our first one. Why don't you share a little bit about kind of who you are, you know, kind of your upbringing, and then most importantly, how you chose to get into this profession. And then we can talk about things as we kind of get down the road, but just kind of a brief introduction on, you know, kind of who you are and what brings you here today.
Okay. So obviously I have a legacy of law enforcement. Did 23 years at Oak Creek, Wisconsin. But I mean, going back to it all, I grew up in Brooklyn. My grandfather was a cop. All my uncles were cops. It's been seriously, in our family, that's always been the way it was. Everybody was in the military, bar none, and then everybody transferred pretty much to civil service in one regard or another. So I did fine in elementary school, did okay in high school, and then you know, you hit that point, you're like, I'm not sure really what I want to do. I was working demolition in Manhattan, just busting buildings, and I'll be honest, it still is one of my favorite jobs. You got up in the morning, you got a cup of coffee, you walk in a high rise and they hand you a sledgehammer and you just bust walls all day. Nobody ever got mad at each other because you got mad, you just go bust another wall. You know, it's the greatest stress reliever there was. But I knew I wasn't going to do that for as long. And I wasn't in the position of, I didn't come from a lot of money. So going to college was just not in the cards at that time, just for monetary reasons. And my dad was in the Army, and I always had this thing with my dad to one-up him. That was just the nature of it. And so he went in the Army, so I joined the Marines.
Wait a minute, that's not one-up.
Oh,
as an Army guy, that's not one up.
That's 10 up. Come on. So back then, anyway, yeah, I joined the service. I scored super high on my ASVAB test, and this is the Marine Corps in a nutshell. I go back to the recruiter, and they're like, "You can do any job you want. You scored high enough. Anything you want to do, you can do." And I'm like, "All I want to do is be an MP." And they're like, "We guarantee you the MP field." And I'm like, "Sweet." So graduation comes, they hand me my orders to go to Fort McClellan for corrections officer. And I'm like, no, I got guaranteed MP. And they're like, "No, you got guaranteed the MP field." So corrections is in the MP field. And I was like, "Well, that sucks." So I worked at the Brig out in Pendleton, Camp Pendleton, for a year. And I'm like, I can't do this. It's guys who don't want to be in the service. That's really where, and then don't get me wrong, I worked SAG, and there was more than enough people that had an 11 work to do hard time because these were just criminals, and that's the way it was. But the large majority, you were just babysitting guys who didn't want to be in the service anymore. So I was fortunate enough to get on embassy duty. I was in Afghanistan when the Russians were there. I was Thailand for a couple of years. And then as soon as I got out, went to the UN. I got out, and then 3 weeks later was working immediately. That idea of being off and doing nothing just didn't appeal to me. So I worked at the UN. Again, fortunate enough to, I worked on the Secretary General's detail, guarded his house, met the heads of state from all over. But I was living in Queens. I met my first wife, and we had 3 cars stolen in a year, and one of the guys in our building got shot, and my daughter was just born. So it was like, "All right, let's go somewhere else."
You say nothing's changed.
No, it's still the same. You know what I mean? So then I wound up coming out to Wisconsin, worked the jail out in Jefferson County, and then got on at Oak Creek, and I enjoyed myself. I was there 23 years. I was one of the founding members of the SWAT team. I worked dope. I did warrants. I did Homeland Security, did all that stuff. We were very fortunate. I was very fortunate that I had leadership that believed in training. So we did more training than I'd put us up against anybody in the country. And I know that sounds overreaching, but our guys right now get minimum 8 hours a month. It's not an off day, but it's your training day. Yeah. And that's every month. And then there's schools that you still go to. So, we ground fight all the time. We shoot all the time. They get updates on everything. So that was super helpful to me in the long run. But that's pretty much my life as we know it till, August 5th, and get involved in the shooting, get shot up. And I think more than anything, what screwed me up was not knowing. Right, I was actually doing my thesis for my master's when the event happened, and all that planning in your life. Like, I was 49. I'm like, all right, as soon as I retire, I'm going to get into emergency management. I had one more class left to get my professional certification for FEMA, and then you wake up in the hospital and it's all gone. Right. And that was the hardest part for me, was trying to figure out, what do I do now? And what do I do with this lifetime of service to my community and my country? What do I do with that? Is it just all gone? It's in a bag. It's going to stay there, or how do you manipulate it? Not manipulate, but how do you use your own toolbox to help other people? And then I was fortunate that Matt Davis, who was the owner of Armor Express, they make ballistics, and we talked, and he's like, "Hey, when you got shot, we gave you a plaque," and we had that. He always remembers this conversation. He goes, "We gave you a plaque." I'm like, "I could build a house with all the freaking plaques I got, man." And he just looked at me and he goes, "Well, what do you need?" And I said, "It'd be nice to have somebody to talk to that's been through this shit." Yeah. And he was like, he just looked at me, he goes, "You want to do that?" I'm like, "Sure." And so that was the larger majority. And that once I got into that, and then you get to talk to people who've been through similar things than you, and they're never exactly the same. No. They're just not. But when somebody's like, you don't know because I've been shot, then you can go, well, how many times? Oh yeah, 5. Yeah, you know, come back when you get another dozen, then we'll chat. But it's never been like that. It's always understanding, man. Is your family okay? Are your children okay? Is your head where it needs to be? So that then floated into getting out and talking to people, debriefing it, showing people what it looks like. I mean, if it wasn't for the backseat camera explaining it, would never show what it really looks like when somebody's messed up. And that's as clean as it looks. This is exactly what shit looks like when it goes sideways. And, you know, that to me has been the helping moment to go, this is as bad as it can get, but you can get by that. You can step up past it, you know.
Right. Brian, can you talk about August 5th, 2012? I mean, for the audience that doesn't know, what happened that day?
Sure. So August 5th, 2012, it's normal Sunday morning right up until 10:25. And then we get a call. There's a fight at the local Sikh temple. And I start heading that way. I know I'm going to be the first one there. As I'm going, it gets upgraded to shots fired. And when I pull in, I can see one guy down, check on him. He's obviously dead. Tell my guys to come in behind me. Now, to preface this, there had been a fight at the temple 6 months before this, and we don't get a lot of calls there ever. We had a call like 6 months prior to that there was a fight between two members of the temple, and it got superheated. So in my head, this is just a reoccurrence of the same thing. Maybe the fight got out of hand or whatever. And nowhere in this were we told this is an active shooting event. This is just that somebody got shot. So once I get there, again, I check on him. Guy comes out the front door, and for the life of me, I've tried this shot myself. I've had it's a buddy of mine in Minnesota runs a training academy. I got $100 up there for anybody who can come near this shot. Bad guy comes out. Don't even know he's the bad guy at the moment, but he's running away from me and doesn't even look. But I see his hand come up. He's got a gun, so we both shoot. But 42 yards, running away, not looking, over the shoulder, one-handed. Puts it in my face, and it hits me in the jaw. It goes down my throat, rattles around, and winds up right behind my carotid. First thought is, shit, I'm in a gunfight. All right, well, let's get it on, because there's no time to sit and go poor me. It's like, all right, this is, it's funny. You go right to, and everybody knows this, but you do go to your level of training. You do go to where your mind has always been. And that's a fact. When there's not time to think it through and ruminate it, you go exactly there. So then it was just, all right, let's get it. And without going into great length, he gets behind me. I come out from behind the car because I'm on the X for 10 seconds. And his next shot takes my thumb off, shoots a gun out of my hand. And then the real shooting starts from there. He lights me up. I get hit 15 times before my backup gets there and was able to hit him in the sideways. He hit it in the stomach sideways. He'd have bled out, but he didn't want to wait, so he shot himself in the head. So yeah, from that point on, the Brian Murphy that existed at 10:24, that's a different person. It just is. And it's not just me. It's my family. It's my friends. It's funny that even this late in the game, I mean, it's been 11 years, and my wife and I were talking, and she said, I still remember the gurgling, because when I got shot in the face, I had the hole there, and And before I get shot, 10:25, they don't bring me into the operating room till just about 1:30. So my wife was able to come in and spend some time before I was in for my first operation, which was, I think, 12, 13 hours on the table. But it was funny. That was the thing. She's like, that gurgling sound, I'll never get that out of my head. That every time you breathed in, it just was this horrible noise. And, like for me, I don't remember that. Not that I don't remember, I remember, but that sound didn't bother me because it's me. But, that's where I think sometimes we lose sight of what happens to your family, just in the sense of my wife has only known me one way. And now to look at this person that you love, and it's so totally, your life now is so bent sideways that there's a lot that goes on for everybody involved. I know the guys on my shift would never be the same because you went through something that not everybody's gone through. And we're a small agency. I had 11 guys on my shift. So we all knew each other for 20 years. And nothing even remotely close had happened to that. We've had murders and, you've had you gone out more than you want to remember, but nobody ever got shot. And that was, that was massive for all of us.
One of the things that inspires me so much about you is that will to live, that fight within you. Where's that come from? I mean, is that just the stubborn Irish in you?
I'll be honest with you. It's more than a little bit of that. My grandfather and my aunt and uncle, my grandmother came over from Ireland. So I'm really just, first generation. But giving up was never, that was never even remotely discussed in our house. And for me, I was a small kid. I remember walking around the halls in high school and getting jacked by the security guy because he didn't think I went to the high school, even though I was a sophomore. I looked like a little baby. And then between sophomore and junior year, actually, and I'm not a big guy, but I grew some. But all those years, being a small guy, and my neighborhood, it was Irish, Italian, Puerto Rican. That's all lower middle class. So all you did was fight. And I'm not saying in a bad way. I mean, there were times you were hanging out on a Friday afternoon and there was nothing going on. So you just go at it with each other, just wrestle on the ground. But you never gave up. That was never accepted. If you were to, and I know it sounds harsh, but everybody understood. I mean, you lose. There's always going to be somebody that's going to be able to take you. That's just life. Right. But if you give it up right away, then nobody respected you. You could lose, but you lose with heart. So I think a lot of that came into play. And then, obviously, being in the Marines and everywhere I've been. But I think it's an innate thing that you cultivate on your own. And that cultivation comes when we're in Afghanistan and we get this threat that they're going to overtake the embassy. We were up for 50 hours straight. You can't go to sleep. There's no giving us up. There's 6 of us, and there's 60,000 people outside. This is right after, a couple of years after the Iranian embassy thing. But you can't give it up. And all those little things that you do, that one extra rep in the gym, that one little, I don't care what it is. It doesn't have to be physically. It's a mental thing that you build it up. You push yourself a little bit harder. You watch the other guy who's a little bit faster than you, and you're like, I'm going to beat him next time. And it may take 30 times to get that one win, but that's it. And that's it's hard to say, here's the step-by-step program to, make yourself a little bit more mentally resilient. But to me, that's where a lot of it comes from, is not necessarily getting pushed by anybody else, but pushing yourself. and ultimately that push is what brings you to the heights that you need to get to. Because let's face it, we're in an area now where comfort is killing a lot of people. You know, if they entertain them, be warm and be fat and happy, and life's good, but that's not it. It's just, you know, comfort kills, and to me, pain is. It's funny. When I first started going out with my wife, I was always pain is weakness leaving the body. You know, we joke around with that, and then so after I get shot, we're in the hospital, and I can't even talk. I'm just mouthing. And I said, I can't believe how much freaking weakness I must have had in me, because that shit just kept coming. Yeah. But again, I mean, I understood that. I watched a lot of the fight when I was right out of the service. My mom, I got out the first week of August, and my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer 2 weeks later. And I watched my mom fight. She had brain and lung cancer for a year before she passed. And my mom never once gave it up. You know, if cancer was coming, it's going to take her. It's not because she stopped. And then my sister had multiple myeloma. She passed March of 2012. And my sister, she did the stem cell thing. She did everything. So believe it or not, that the mental images of warriorship and perseverance and resilience are both my mom and my sister. And that's a fact. So it's you don't have to look to the TV. You don't have to look around. It's there. You just got to see what it truly is.
Absolutely. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you, Brian, but a friend of mine, Toby Weberg, lived right around the corner, right?
Yeah.
From where your shooting took place. He heard the commotion, headed over there. He actually texted me while it was going on, saying, "Hey, we got a bad day. We got an officer down." I flew out 2 weeks after that and spoke to some of his guys. You were in the hospital, and I was not going to come bother you at all. And we hadn't met yet at that point.
Okay.
But of course, he shared a lot of some of the frustrations from the management side of trying to deal with this, right? And I don't know if I necessarily want to get into that, but I want to build off what you were just talking about. Because here you are, you're shot, you're injured, and you've got that will to fight. So many times in our profession, individuals go through these critical things and nowhere near what you went through, right? But still become cynical and bitter and angry. And so here you are fighting for your life. You fight through the physical stuff, but then at some point, you had to make a conscious choice that, listen, I'm going to try to make the world a little bit better here. I'm going to talk about this so that people can prepare. Where did that come from? Is that just, again, innate inside you? Was that a conscious decision? Because that's, in my opinion, that's pretty powerful. To say, hey, look, I'm not going to let this thing beat me. I'm not going to live as a victim. I'm moving forward, and I'm going to try to make this world a better place, and I'm going to share this so that we can do it better. And that's a lot of what the Centurion's about, right? It is training, preparing, getting our people to be able to move forward. I don't know if I caught you cold-footed, but maybe you could just kind of speak to that a little bit, because I think our listeners would love to hear, again, a little bit of that resiliency, but that drive, not just the physical stuff, but the drive to keep going forward.
It's funny. I know Toby well because we were both SWAT guys, and just the fact that there's that. And I make no mistake about this, and I don't want to get into it, but sometimes things happen for a reason, and that's just the way it is. Toby being in our city with his radio on when that takes place is huge. Because he's got his SWAT team going before ours is even activated. Right. So he's got a Bearcat coming. He's got guys coming. You know, had he not been there, who knows? And yeah, I did hear some of the it's a conversation for another day on the management aspect of things. And again, I mean, flipping it all around, third day in the hospital, I wake up And I'm looking at the TV, and they have Mr. Dulai. He's now the president of the temple because Mr. Kalika got killed. And I'm watching that thing, and he said, "We forgive the bad guy." And I remember looking, and I got casts in my hands. I got a trachea tube and all this nonsense. And I thought, that ain't me. I'm gonna hate this guy forever.
Yeah.
But a lot of the conversation that took place, some was with my former chief, Tom Bauer, and I remember having coffee with him, and he goes, "What are you going to do?" And I said, "I have no idea." He said, "But you can't focus on what happened. You got to focus on where you're going." And I'm like, "You're right." And my wife got me Marcus Aurelius's Meditations.
Cool.
And if anybody out there, if you don't have that book, go grab it, because it's amazing, the insight from the most powerful man on earth, that sometimes it's okay to go, well, shit, I don't know what I'm going to do right this second. But the next thing is, I can't focus on what already happened. I can only focus on where I'm going. And I think that was between that, my former chief, my wife especially, Ann was always like, "What are you going to do now? But stop looking back. Where do we go from here?" And that's always kind of been my thing is, but when I wake up in the hospital, my daughter Erica is in Korea teaching English. Now, my sister had died in March, so I flew her back for my sister's funeral. She goes back. Her mother, my ex-wife, died in June. So I flew her to Ireland for her funeral. And I remember talking to her in July before the shooting. And she said they're not going to let me take any more time off and this, that, and the other thing. So when I wake up in the hospital, my wife asked, she said, "Should we get Erica?" And I just looked at her just like I'm kind of looking at you, and I go, "Am I going to die?" And she said, "No." And I said, "Then no. Well, I'll need her later. I'm not going to need her in the hospital." And really, from that moment, it was like, I'm not going to die. Okay. But what else? But then how do we fix this shit? What do I do to make myself better? And I was fortunate fortunate/unfortunate. Back in 2010, I had messed up my back on duty, and I wound up having 2 major back surgeries, got my spine fused on the S3-4-4-5. So I have a double level fusion. And this is what I always wanted to be. This is what I always wanted to do. I remember fighting with the doctor, the workers' comp doctors, like, I've only had one guy come back from this type of surgery in all my years. I'm like, okay. And he said, "Yeah, I'm not going to sign off on you." And I went ballistic. And I go, and I don't know why I did it, but it just infuriated me that with a swipe of your pen, you will wipe out 20 years of law enforcement. And I told him that, and I'm like, "Who the hell are you? You're a doctor. Don't tell me what my job is." So I got my own lawyer. I got my own physical trainer. I want to be a cop. This is what I want to do. So I push myself then. So then when the shooting happens and you're sitting there and you're like, crap, I have to do something. I have to move it forward. And I've always been, I've always tried, I don't want to say I've always been, I've always tried to be mindful of my actions and how they affect everybody else. So like when my guys came to get me, when I was between cars, and they were like, "All right, they're doing an officer rescue." But my first thought is, well, I know the guy over here is dead. I know he lit me up. I can't imagine what's in the temple. So I told them immediately, get in the temple. And Mike Schultz, who was a bull, he looked at me and he's like, "You're a mess," and he picks me up. But even when I was at the hospital, like, to me, it never ceased. I gave him all the information I can give him. I'm trying to maintain my calm because, you guys know this. Once you as a leader lose your stuff, everybody goes sideways. Yeah. So I'm getting around to the point here is you can't lose sight of who you are. And part of the not giving up is giving someone else the power to take away from you. So every day afterwards, every day that I'm going to rehab and it sucked, getting my thumb, at my thumb was so bad, man. It was, if you blew air on it, it felt like a blowtorch. It was just hypersensitive. So you're running stuff on. It was brutal. But I always thought, if I give it up to the bad guy and go, you beat me today, well, then it's easy to go, you beat me again tomorrow. Right. Why am I even trying? So I think that was the bigger issue. And I'm like, we've all been there. We've all listened at conferences to debriefs and whatnot. But once I sat down and I looked at the videos and I'm like, we got to show this, because this is one, it's the way it should be done. And yes, there were things that could have been fixed. Sure. But generally speaking, it went as well as it could go. Do you know what I mean? And again, it's telling a story to reinforce, and everybody who takes this job, you took the job for a reason. I don't care what tag you want to give yourself, whether it's a centurion, warrior, guardian, I don't care. But you took on this role, you took this title and stepped up. And none of it's going to go, whether it's, you raise your hand, you swear on the Constitution. It shouldn't end when your boss pissed you off. It shouldn't end when, Nancy starts breaking your chops over getting a ticket. It shouldn't end because somebody's giving you a name. No. That's when you just look and you go, I am in charge of me. I can't control you. You got to, and that's that back to meditations. That's where I learned immediately, like, man, it's got to get out. Just control yourself first. Right. If you control yourself first, you do good things, you do right things, you do things that won't hurt you physically, spiritually, and mentally, you'll be fine. And Matt Davis had me go to Aida. And I did this horrible PowerPoint. I sucked at it. But I did the PowerPoint and just told my story just as plain as I could. Like, here it is, guys, man. This is what happened. This is what I thought. When that guy shot me and I rolled under the car to check myself, my first thought is, I'm not dying on a goddamn parking lot. That's never going to happen. I got a wife and kids. I will get home to my wife and kids. And that in and of itself. So after I did this, there were a line of guys to come and talk to me. And they were like, this happened to me, and this happened to me. And this guy after guy after guy. And I'm like, man, we got to get out and let this get out there and go. It's not the event. It's how we look at the event, how we perceive the event, how we let that event overtake us. It can't change. It's there. It's in stone. What else you got? My answer always is, what else you got? Right. You didn't kill me then. So if I didn't die from lead poisoning, how am I letting anything else fucking kill me? Right. Do you know what I mean? Like, how am I letting that guy who killed himself, how can I let him beat me? It's just not going to happen, and I think that point, that turning point of taking ownership of my life versus giving it to the dead guy and saying, look at what you did to me. My answer is, not good enough. Let's go, and move on from there.
It's a powerful message, right? And I think for the young officers that are out there listening, even some of the older ones, right? Hopefully they take heart to that they're in control. Yeah, we have a bad day. Admin makes a bad decision. The politicians attack the profession. We're still in control, right? And that's what you're saying right here. And that's a powerful message. We are still in control of us and how we move forward and what we do, right? And not let them control us. And so thank you. Thank you for those words. And I hope that we've got some people out there listening that take that to heart.
And then this yourself, we've all been in a position where we have a regret. We've done something on the job or personally that we've lost control of ourselves. And in that moment of losing control, whether it's, and we all know this, yeah, but I was drunk. No, you chose to be drunk, and your drunkenness made you lose control. And I'm not getting up, let's not kid each other. I'm not getting up on a soapbox and saying I never did. I'm just saying that regret, maybe I was heavy-handed dealing with my child. I was heavy-handed dealing with the victim. I was heavy-handed with this. All comes from I didn't control myself enough to be a better human being. And people lose sight of, people have and do lose sight of the fact that by controlling yourself, you actually show the most strength that there humanly is. This is not a powerlifting event. This is not how hard we can punch. It's when that adversity, like, let me tell you, whatever. But the minute I go, don't you tell me, then we're done. You won, right. I lost.
Right.
So, and then what's funny, man? So they bring us to my wife and I to IACP, right, back in 2012.
Yeah.
And we're out in San Diego, and we were out just doing some shopping. We're in the mall. Now I can only whisper at this point, and I'm looking for the bathroom. So I still got my hands all wrapped, and so I asked somebody, I'm like, "Where's the bathroom?" And the answer is, "It's over there. Just go down the hall." And I realized, man alive, I should have did this 20 years ago. If I'm yelling at you, I'm only going to agitate you and make you yell. But if the more I lower my voice, it's harder for you to keep yelling at me. And that is pure control. It's as much control there as in putting somebody in an armbar.
Right.
It just is without a use of force report. and that's what I thought. I'm like, man, there's so much of what happened post August 5th, 2012 that I wish I knew when I got hired. And just the simple things in our existence, like be nice. Control is also being nice. When somebody's yelling at you, be nice. And, again, it's ownership. It really does come down to, it's your life. You have to own it. And the they thing, and I was a they guy. Like, after I got passed over for promotion the 5th time, then it was they. They. But the bottom line is, it's my life. And you go out on the road and you talk to guys and you're like, well, they won't send me to go shoot. Do you not know how to buy ammo? Right. Go shoot yourself. It's your life. If they don't want to do it, it's still yours. And if you know I'm a hothead, then do something to fix that. Own that weakness. And that's what actually makes it. And you notice, AJ, that's what makes the job easier. Once you own your weaknesses and make them better, it makes the job way easier.
Makes life easier.
Exactly. Life way easier. And you're like, well, shit, what was I doing for so long? Getting stressed and getting angry and, over what? Yeah. But again, the job's going to be there tomorrow, man.
Yes, it is.
It is,
Right.
I'm you know this, but I just have to say it. I think for everybody that becomes a cop, you have this thought in your mind about what it'll be like if it's my given day, right? You hope that you rise up to that standard that, frankly, you set. That you're the inspiration for all of us that think if it's that day, we can win. But you worry about that, right? You think, boy, how will I respond? How will I act? And then we hear you present, and I look at a room full of cops watching you when you do your presentations. And what strikes me is that you give them permission and giving themselves permission to win. And it lifts them up. And if you can do it, I can do it. If you survived, I know I'm going to be like that. And that is incredibly motivating. I've talked to so many cops that have walked away from your presentations that have had that moment of clarity where they say, that's what I want to be. That's who I want to be like if it's my given day. There's something incredibly honorable and powerful about that. And the fact that you're talking about it with so many cops around the country, I think, especially for a new generation that looks at the world very differently, I think it's an important conversation that needs to be had today. Because where do you learn the will to fight, the will to survive, the will to live, the will to win? We had this conversation in our last podcast. People can take a lot from you. They can, throughout your life, a lot can be taken from you, but they can't take your professionalism, your integrity, your pride, your drive, your will to live. You can give it up, but it can't be taken from you.
Right.
I think there's power in what you do, and I'm such a fan, I can't tell you, because everybody has heroes in this life. The cool thing for me today is I got two of my heroes right here. I'm living large. I got to tell you, this is really cool stuff for me.
Well, we do talk. Go ahead, Brian. Go ahead.
You brought something up, John, and we go into generational, and we say, well, this generation doesn't have, and I'm sure the World War II generation looked at the generation after that and said, you guys are, you're light and you're weak. But, and this just hit me. So I was doing a thing for Michigan State Patrol, right? It was just their academy class. And they had like 75 people graduating. And I said, how many of you have never been in a fight, like a real fight? And 57 of them raised their hands. So I guess the question then comes into play, why? And part of that is you can't blame them. You can't say we can't say to them, that's your fault that you haven't been into a fight, because the school system is different. Society is different. Everything is different. So they're being raised. Like I said, we would fight just for the fun of it. Somebody came out with it. They found a pair of boxing gloves, 2 sets of boxing gloves. Man, that turned into like a week-long, March Madness bracket of kicking each other's teeth in for fun, But you can't do that now. And I guess I look at it, anybody who wants to get into this profession, I give you the utmost amount of respect, because you're looking to take on a profession that is second to none. There's only 630,000 cops, give or take, in the country, for a country of 350 million. Think about that. You're entering into an arena that truly is gladiatorial. Every day is a different event. Every day is something different. And every day you could lose your life. That's a fact. So I look at these guys and I think back to the ownership. If you've never been into a fight, and I have it in my presentation, how do you know you won't be in a fight for your life tomorrow? You don't. We don't control when bad stuff happens. It comes to us. It's how we deal with it. But I guess that's the hard part, is to take my growing up in the late 60s and 70s, and then transferred to a group that grew up in the 2000s, where things was just so totally different. And my answer to those guys, and guys is generic, the guys and girls who are getting into this profession, is if you know this may be a part and could be a life-ending part of your profession, you need to get involved in it sooner. It's very difficult to get into a a fight, not a controlled fight. I mean, in reality, the UFC is a controlled fight because there's a ref there, there's rules there. But if you can do that, then you have a good idea. And more, you guys know this as well as I do. Sun Tzu went on about this thousands of years ago. The battle's won before you ever get on in the battlefield. Right. So if you put in the sweat now, the sweat equity, then, sweat more now, bleed less then. If you've never done that, ask. That's always my thing. Go ask, go find, because once I went to a true jiu-jitsu instructor, man, it's different than doing force-on-force training. It just is. And you realize these people want to teach you. They want you to be safe. And that's the truth of it. So avail, I suck at swimming. That's the only thing I can't ever do. I have the buoyancy of a rock. It's and I mean that. I had a buddy of mine. We're in Thailand and out in the ocean. And he's like, here, let me see you swim. And I'm like, all right, because he's a really good swimmer. And he watches me and he goes, I've never seen that in my life. He says, you're doing everything great. You're just not going anywhere. And I go, I know. It's like swimming in that Michael Phelps pool that never moves. But I tried. And I gave my effort because this, especially in the Marines, is something I may need to do. I can save myself, but could I save my partner? Could I save my other Marines? And so it's the same business. And this is where, if you're getting into law enforcement, it's another piece of the puzzle. Besides yourself, you may be tasked to save someone else. You have to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, and you hit the nail on the head, John. Nobody knows how you're really going to react until it happens. Nobody really knows that. But if I task myself enough times to things leading up to that giant trauma, and I know I was able to do step 1, I was able to do step 2, I could get to 6. Man, if you could, and we've all done this. It's funny. If you can run 2 miles, I got news for you. You can run a marathon. You can. It's just the mental aspect that, I could never do it. It's the same. So if you roll for a while, you have padding on, but you go in and fight, you're building that mental capability to go, I can do this. And I looked at those guys in State Patrol. I said, that should be your first order of business. If you've never really done this, let's get out and do it now, because I would hate that the first fight you've ever been in is a fight for your life and you have no idea what you're capable of.
Absolutely, right? And the power in that. And again, you can't blame society to where we're at. We've evolved. Things have changed. I grew up in the same situation as you, right? I mean, you settled your differences in the sandbox out on the playground, and that's what we did. You learn that, and we do see these individuals that have grown up, and we're the problems. The parents of that generation are the ones that have changed everything around so that their kids aren't fighting, right? And so really, we're the problem with that. And then you take these young individuals that are, again, you have the most reverence for them because they're stepping into this profession. They want to make a difference, yet they haven't been in any of those situations. And to own that, with there being a dojo on almost every corner, to find one that is pro law enforcement, we talk about being prepared, mind, body, and soul, right? Mind, body, and soul. To be dedicated. To say, hey, I haven't been in a fight. Well, I'm going to fix that. I'm going to go learn how to take care of myself, because if I can take care of myself, then I can take care of my partner. If I can take care of my partner, then I can take care of the citizens, right? And that's just the dedication to the profession. To put in that extra work. Like you said, you can go buy your own ammo. There's plenty of ranges, right? That firearm is our life-saving tool. As you know, right? It is our life-saving tool. It is equivalent to our profession as a scalpel is to a surgeon. It is our life-saving tool, and we should be dedicated and working with that tool. So on our given day, we're a little more effective. I was going to actually ask you, what words of wisdom would you give people coming into this profession? Because this, we've been beat up. We've been beat up over the last few years. We got a bunch of black eyes and a bunch of scars. But I think you might have already done that for me with what you just talked about, and it was priceless.
So I'm going for detective, right? And we had to do a questionnaire kind of thing, and like, what are the three biggest traits for being a detective? Right now, my uncle and my mom's cousin, it's one of those family things. What do you call them? But so John was he's in charge of the detective bureau in New York, right, NYPD. So I called John up and I'm like, hey, I got a question for you. What's the number one thing? And he goes, to be able to listen. I'm like, all right, what's number two? To be able to listen. What's number three? To be able to listen. He goes, I don't care. He can go on till 500. He goes, your ability to listen. He goes, why do you have 2 ears and only 1 mouth?
Yeah.
He goes, listen, and you'll get everything you need to know. When that person that you're going to deal with, they will tell you what they're going to do, maybe not in specific words, but they're telling you what they're going to do. So but you talk about the physicality of the job, which is paramount to me. And I've been fortunate enough that I've been blessed with low eyebrows. So when I look at somebody, it looks like I'm scowling immediately. And I was big enough in my day that when I showed up and gave you the look, more times often than not, it would pause a little bit at least. So that presence, that just, that like on that, I don't know what they even call it anymore, but the force continuum is presence as your first thing. So that was the first thing. But I always took the time to listen and watch. And I know we're going back to what you talked about. What words of wisdom are there, man? Nobody wants to hear what you have to say your first 6 months on a job. Right. You need to be a sponge, watch. And I'm not saying every FTO you have is going to be the greatest FTO in the world, but you'll get a sense of what kind of officer you want to be, and that not everybody does this job exactly the same. Right. And that's okay too, because you want diversity in the workplace. You want people who are have strengths different than yours, and you know what I'm getting at. But I learned more from listening. I learned, and we're going, this shows you how old I am. I learned more, and I got better respect with a pack of cigarettes than I did anything else. Because when somebody's all bent out of shape, whoa, relax. You smoke? Yeah, all right, here. Have a cigarette, take a deep breath. Let's figure this out together. And just that, I love getting on the ground. Honest to God, I still love rolling on the ground. But if I could talk you into cuffs, what's better?
Right.
My career is going to go a heck of a lot longer. My body's going to be so much more thankful to me when I'm older that I was able to talk you into things. And that ability to listen is what's going to make your job easier, not only just in the profession, but in your home life. And cops in general, we tend to be, we're here to solve the problem. What do you got? What do you want, babe? Do this. And that's good sometimes. It's not good all the time. So learn that balance of when I need to listen and when I actually do need to talk. I don't want to get into politics necessarily, but that's where I think somebody named Don makes mistakes, is they don't listen. They do too much talking. And then you just come off like a freaking know-it-all. And especially in the cop world, when you're like, the guy kept trying to tell you 5 times what he was going to do, and you didn't want to listen to him.
Right.
and it's just those little things that are what's going to make your job easier. And isn't the whole point of what we do to help people when they're at their worst moment? And that's the difference between us and, it's funny. My wife and I were talking because my daughter's boyfriend wants to be a fireman. And my wife asked me, she goes, why does everybody love firemen? Everybody hates cops. I said, well, firemen come only when you're having a medical emergency or your house is on fire. So they will always be saving you. And what we do is not saving people. We do, but they just don't see it the same way. By stopping a car that's doing 25 miles an hour over and writing them a ticket, you are saving their lives. You are, or you're saving someone else's life, but I'm also costing somebody money. And they don't want to know that. So I said, that's the real difference in how we do it. And let's face it, firemen have all that freaking time on their hands. They can figure out ways to promote themselves better. That boot on the corner bullshit and all that. They just have a better PR department than the FOP does. But again, it still comes down to you're picking a profession, the most honorable profession that you can have that serves your community. And once
without question,
that's sometimes I think we get lost in that. Well, what is it for me? It's protect and serve. Don't lose sight of that service part. And sometimes service requires you to get bitched out a little bit because somebody's upset there. Where were you when my car was getting stolen? I get it. You're upset.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But that's your job. Listen, let somebody blow off some steam and go about your business. But always, you go home at the end of the night. You go home at the end of your shift. That is rule number one.
Yeah.
And you go home not only physically, but again, spiritually, morally, that you can go home and say, I did my best job today. Then it's funny because there's class upon class upon class of what you should do. And the answer really just comes down to the right thing.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth?
It is. It's we get so wrapped up in the hows, but the answer really still comes down to do the right thing. Right? Isn't that when you think about it, isn't that the Supreme Court's rulings on everything? What would a reasonable officer do? Right. Well, reasonable officers just doing the right thing. If you do the right thing, you're going to be covered and it'll all be good.
Absolutely.
And I apologize. I'm a fucking talking machine.
Well, that's why we have you here, right?
Yeah, right.
We want to hear what you
fill
have
up an hour.
We want to hear what you have to say and those words of wisdom. And those come from the dark nights that you had to go through that have formed who you are and forged in fire, really, to still be positive, moving forward, and affecting this profession probably more now so than ever with your message.
It's funny that 23 years of doing it, and I've done more. I think I've done more in the 11 since, because I've had the opportunity. I've been blessed with the opportunity to tell people, hey, and then again, this soapbox that I'm on, trust me, it took a while to get on there because I made all these mistakes already. I did them all over and over and over again, and being stubborn, and I won't let anybody tell me. No. I think the minute you stop learning, the minute you stop wanting to learn, then you need to turn to something else. And in law enforcement, every day is a learning opportunity. You know what I mean? Don't be afraid to listen to the 16-year-old kid, because you'd be surprised. Maybe that kid's got more insight and a different insight into things than you'll ever have. Right. And by shutting them down quick. And AJ, this, being an SRO to me is one of the biggest jobs in the world.
Yes.
You're out there with people who are still malleable, who still are able to take in and judge for themselves. And if you're doing the right thing, especially in a school environment, man, you have the ability to just show, and that's really what it all comes down to, is show what the majority of law enforcement officers are doing every day. It's easy to sit and go, well, what about that one cop that one time? And you're like, yeah, I know they made a mistake. Then they should. They're going to have to answer for their mistake. But there's 634,999 officers doing it right every single day. So show up, do it right, and those cops will remember you.
You know,
those kids will, yeah.
That SRO position that you talk about is so near and dear to the work that I do, because at a time when the bridge between law enforcement and community is being torn down in some communities, the SRO is that bridge between community and law enforcement, between next generation and you know, kids in their life. A lot of times, family circumstance, they have bad experiences with parents being taken away or cops respond to their house. But that SRO, that's the greatest opportunity for positive relationship that we can ever have with kids. And that foundation is everything.
It is, and it lasts a lifetime.
Yeah.
You know, I definitely, you know, and AJ, you get this. I had a boss who was all about wearing medals. I had to have the big old fruit salad going all the time. And it would always come to me like, why do you not wear them? And I'm like, because they're just mine. I don't need to show them to anybody. I know the job I do. Always wore my SWAT pin. But you still have to, and the reason why I bring that up is, why are you doing the job? Are you doing the job so you can wear a medal? Or are you doing the job because you're doing the right thing and you're affecting people in the right way? I arrested that there's a car on the side of the road, got flashers on. I pull up, talk to the guy. Hey, the car's broke down. Is it okay if I leave it here? I'll get it back tomorrow. And sorry, that's me. And I said, yeah, I'll give you a ride home. Right. So I pat him down, put him in the back, and we're driving. And he goes, you don't remember me, do you? And I'm like, no. And right away, I'm like, man, I hope I didn't, hurt this guy earlier on and I missed something. And he goes, 5 years ago, you arrested me for drunk driving. I'm like, okay. And he goes, you treated me like a man. You treated me with respect. And he said, I haven't had a drop to drink in 5 years.
Yeah.
And he said, I still have my wife. I still have my family, which I was about to lose. If this guy's car doesn't break down, you don't know that. So it's not about medals. It's about affecting someone's life because you were nice and did the right thing at the right time. That, to me, is the crux of what law enforcement truly is. Right. We're hoping that politicians are going to run to our aid, that ain't happening. But the majority, again, take it for what it is. The majority out there, the 80% out there, need you, want you to do the right thing. And we are in a well-respected position. We're just, unfortunately, at a time that the empty barrels are the ones making the most noise and trying to lead the other 80% to believe this is the way you should think.
Right.
And the way you affect that way of thinking is back to do the right thing.
Right.
That's it. You know what I mean? And everything else will fall into place. And I don't, it's funny. You look at all these people like, oh, get rid of the SROs. And where are they now? They realize we need SROs in school. This is a bridge. This is important. We don't defund the police, that whole diatribe. For who? Why would you defund the police? Even that the most hardcore person is so. If you're allowed to just do whatever you wanted, is that the society you want to live in, where nothing is answerable and we're all allowed? Tell me a society that's ever done that in the history of humanity. And if they did, how long did they actually last? Because I don't know anybody. I mean, going pre-Roman, that stuff never happened. Somebody's been, Centurions were there for a reason.
Yes.
That's just the way it is,
Exactly.
Let's take a break for a minute.
Yeah.
Preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind.
That was a cool episode. We filled up a whole hour. That was easy.
That wasn't even with a drink in me. Jesus.
Right. I know, right? I think, do you remember the first time you and I had a drink together? We were in Jason Fitzwater's house.
Oh, that's right.
Ron McCarthy was there.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Was Raul
first time
there?
we had a drink. Huh?
Was Raul there?
Raul was there as well. Yes.
That's right. Yeah. Mike. Yeah. Watching Knox play basketball in the living room when he was like that tall.
Exactly.
Yeah. And it's, you forget how long, how fast it all goes.
It goes by in a blink of an eye, right? I mean, in a heartbeat, and boom, here we are.
Right.
It's crazy.
It's funny, even when there's many, you're on the job 5 years and you're like, how the hell am I going to do 30 years? And then you're like, what do you mean I got to retire? What happened? What happened all that time? Right. It just zips by. I think the only thing that I didn't mention, and I probably should, is balance. I mean, you got to still have a life. You got to have interest outside law enforcement. You got to have friends outside law enforcement. So you don't get in that trap of cynicism and only we know what's right because we're out there every day. I think that's super important. It's especially for me, very, very early on. When we moved here, we didn't have family. So we stayed very centric, and that wasn't the healthiest thing to be in. And now it's like, what do? You're painting cars, good for you. Who cares?
Right.
What do you like doing? So, that's the part that I think everybody needs to be part of is, if you're going to be part of the community, you can't just be the law enforcement community. You got to be part of the whole community.
Yeah. And I think the younger generation, or the generation that's coming into it now, understands that probably better than we did.
Yeah.
They have better life-work balance. Although sometimes I think it goes too far. Right? Sometimes it goes too far to where, hey, I want to be on SWAT, but I don't want to be on call. Well, okay, come on, right? I mean, there come sacrifices to what we want to do.
Exactly.
I do think that they have a better understanding of that than we did.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how many guys did you know, even when you first started the job, who had that mentality, like, if I'm not here, if I'm not the one here, that things are going to go bad.
Yeah.
And you're like, I'm sorry, do you ever have an off day? Because it still works when you're not here.
Right.
But those are the guys you usually find after the fact have a harder time with retirement because it's only ever been the job.
Right. Heck, I wish I had retired sooner. It's it's funny because a lot of the conferences that I've done and been crazy busy lately, right? But you get excited because you made it to the other side. Right. And you still have the ability to give and push and move things forward. But I'll tell you, some of those larger agencies, they get it. They're like, yeah, man, you made it to the other side. I'm on your heels. I'm coming. And,
right.
But
and it's
I shouldn't say because I haven't retired all the way yet, right? I mean, I'm off the job, you know that, but just busier than heck. But it's a good busy.
Yeah.
Since I get to pick and choose, and you get to pick and choose.
There you go. That, and if you're like, I need a bit of a break, you can get one.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that, Right. And then living a giant place like John, having acres and acres and living life to the fullest. I'm happy for you, John.
I appreciate it. I'm still trying to figure out the work-life balance. I have never been very good at it. I'm the first to admit it. I'm taking our first vacation in 12 years.
Jesus.
And like 2 months, we're going to Europe, and of course, I'll be terrified that something will happen when I'm gone, and I won't be there because I'm that guy that wants to be there. Because I know if I'm there, I can affect change or help or give hope. But it's tough, right? Because that's us. That's what we do, and.
So when at the end of the day, I guess the biggest question always comes into play is when it's your time, when it's your actually going out time. Can you look back and go, I gave everything, and how much of what your legacy is? That I started doing that more in my presentation is what's your echo? I played that little clip from Gladiator, what you do now echoes through all eternity, and what's your echo? And I think, what you guys do and the way you continue to do it, that's your echo. People are going to remember that. And that's a good thing. We're all here for a reason. And then I would hate to think you put all this time and effort into doing this job, and when it's your time to just be done, that nobody remembers it. And I just don't think it works that way. I think your words carry on. I think the way you did your job carries on, but you still have to have a balance on who you are, because you are separate from the job.
I think something AJ says resonates with me. I've thought about it a lot over the years, but everybody, every victim of crime of violence, everybody that has been impacted by these mass casualty events, they deserve better than they got. They deserve better than we gave. So the work is doing better going forward so that we can bring those lessons learned, those learnings forward and be better responders, better crisis managers, better leaders, and make that difference. And that resonates with me in a lot of what I do, because we've all been impacted in this work, personally and professionally, by what we've seen, what we've been through, what you experience. And we owe it to be as good at our craft as we can be, because every victim deserves that.
Yeah, that I agree with. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So where are you guys off to next?
Well, AJ's traveling the world. I'm traveling the country.
Ain't nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I'm off to Canada, and then we got Chicago, Nebraska, Serbia. I'll be in Serbia with the State Department for a week. If this government shutdown doesn't squash that, I hope not. Boy, I'm just busy.
Good.
How about you?
I believe it or not, mellow. I did November, the Joliet thing.
Yeah.
I got to.
Yeah, I will be seeing you there in November. Yep. We'll be together. Yeah.
Yep. And I got to do something with local FBI guys. I forget, a couple of weeks, nothing huge, couple of podcasts and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's weird. It's my stuff. I'm on definitely not as many gigs.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. How do I reinvent it to get it back out or just let it,
I think it ebbs and flows, right? I mean, it ebbs and flows. There's the need. There's always going to be the need. It just, it comes in cycles, is what I have found from, still talking about Columbine, which was 20 plus years ago. There's still the need for it, but it ebbs and it flows. And, you have nothing to reinvent. Your story is as powerful as it gets. I think that as far as, speaking engagements, COVID really knocked everything down. And I think people are still trying to figure out, how do we go forward? How do we do some of this stuff? But hopefully, we can bring you back on, because there's so many more things, Brian, that I would like to pick your brain on that we don't necessarily have time for today. But just the insights. This has been pretty cool. Wouldn't you say, John?
This has been really cool. I really want to have another conversation with you. I think we need a conversation with the three of us about active shooter response and preparedness in this country, from law enforcement, from schools, and community. And we didn't even touch on that. And but we need to, and we need to have that conversation. So if you come back again, and we can have part 2 with, that'd be cool.
Well, what would be cool is if we could be in the same room together and have that glass of whiskey, right?
There you go.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We can make that happen here. We can bring both of you out here to our studio, and I think there's real value in that, and that'd be really cool.
Yeah, make it happen.
All right.
But you got to go right now. Now you got to catch him when he's not hitting the international circuit.
I know. I tried to, talk him into bringing me to Canada. I mean, I grew up near the Canadian border, and I know how to speak Canadian. All you have to do is say "eh" after every sentence, and it's all good, eh?
I honest to goodness, I went to the same place a couple of times out in Victoria. I love it. Then the guys there they're super nice. They're just, in Toronto, I did Toronto too. But I was hoping. Mike Neal kept telling me, "Oh, we got that. I got to get you out to Banff." And I've never been there.
Gorgeous.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, they're amazing individuals fighting the same fight in a little bit different political realm, right? And so I think
we all think like, no, it's only here, and you're like, it's the same place. It's the same
everywhere.
Yeah,
everywhere, right?
Same story, just different people. That's all.
Yeah, for sure.
Brian, it was great to see you. We're going to thank you to our sponsor, Safe Haven Defense, our producer, Brett Manning, for my podcast partner, AJ DeAndrea. This is John McDonald signing off, as we always do. To us, the Centurions, and those like us, damn few left.
Damn few left.
Amen.
Thank you to Safe Haven Defense for sponsoring today's podcast and for walking the Centurion's path with us. Safe Haven Defense, preserving property, protecting lives, providing peace of mind.